それでは、マリアンヌ副社長も到着しましたので、ただいまからの第5回エネルギー情勢懇談会を開催いたします。委員の皆様におかれましては、お忙しい中、お集まりいただきまして、ありがとうございます。感謝申し上げます。本日、五ノ上委員と白石委員が欠席でございます。なお、世耕経済産業大臣は、本日、国会対応5時までございまして、5時半頃にこちらの懇談会に、ご出席する予定でございます。本日は、総合エネルギー企業として、グローバルに石油、電力、ガスなどのエネルギー事業を手掛けておられます企業の皆様の、経営戦略を中心にご議論をいただきます。今回も海外から有識者の方々にご参加をいただいておりますので、ご意見をいただきながら進めさせていただきます。まず、海外からの有識者の方、ご紹介をいたします。まず、フランス EDF 社のマリアンヌ・レイニョ副社長でございます。続きまして、フランス NG 社のディディオ・オロー副社長でございます。また、テレビ会議からでございますけれども、オランダロイヤルダッチシェル社のガイ・オーテン副社長にご参加をいただいてございます。ハロー、オーテン。EDF 社は、フランスでの原子力発電を軸としながら、再エネの促進、あるいは積極的な国際事業の展開を進めておられます。また、エンジン社におかれては、ガス事業から電力自由化を契機に電力事業に参入、あるいは水素事業などにも注力をしてこられてございます。シェル社は世界的な石油メジャーの一つでございますけれども、エネルギー展開やモビリティシフトの流れの中で、新たな事業領域にも取り組んでおられるということでございます。各社の皆様には、当方、委員の皆様の問題意識を事前にお伝えをしてございます。今日もiPad でもご確認できますけれども、資料4というものをご覧ください。質問事項として、3社の皆様に、事前にお渡ししているものでございます。まず脱炭素化、低炭素化の潮流を踏まえた各社の事業戦略、こうした大きな潮流の中で、現在の事業のポートフォリオを形成するに至った契機、あるいは理由、今後の事業展開の見通しなどをお聞きしてございます。エンジン社につきましては、ガスを中心に地域エネルギー供給の展開、あるいは水素事業への挑戦、ベンチャー投資などについてのご質問を投げかけてございます。EDF 社につきましては、原子力を中心に再エネへの投資、あるいはその電力ゼロエミッション化、デジタル化への挑戦、そういったものについてご質問をしてございます。シェル社につきましては、石油からガスシフト、さらには多角化、再生可能エネルギーや水素への投資の開始といった現状と今後の見通しをお聞きしてございます。質問2としては、もちろんですけれども、グローバル戦略の方向性についてお聞きをし、質問3、石油ガス戦略、これはシェルについてでございますけれども、特に低炭素化の中での石油ピーク論をどう捉えているか、あるいはどのようなシナリオ分析をされているかということについてご質問をしてございます。それから議論の一助とするために資料5というもので事務局の方からお示ししている資料がございます。資料5をご確認ください。ページを1ページ目めくっていただきますと目次がございまして、過去3回の論点整理、これまでの有識者の皆様の、発言していただいたポイントを整理したものがございます。それから本日との関係で申しますと、7ページをご覧ください。7ページは、国際的な主要電力企業の概要ということで、左から2つにエンジ社と EDF 社の概要を掲げてございます。 エンジン社、EDF 社、それぞれ売上高が日本円で 9.4 兆円、10.1 兆円ということで、ほぼ10兆円規模の売上でございます。その中で海外での売上が、エンジン社は 64%、EDF 社も 47% と、非常に高い割合で、海外での売上、国際転嫁をされているということでございます。電源構成で申しますと、エンジン車は火力が 75%、これはガスが中心でございますけれども、それを基礎といたしまして、原子力、再エネの方にも展開をしていると。それから EDF 社は原子力が 81%、EDF 社は世界最大の原子力事業者でございますけれども、それに加えまして、再エネ火力にも展開しているということでございます。8ページをご覧ください。8ページは石油企業の概要でございますけれども、左から2番目に、シェル社を示してございます。売上高は25兆円。企業戦略としては、その下に石油ガス開発ということでいうと、最近はガスシフトの傾向ということで、生産量に占めるガスの比率が徐々に上がってきているということでございます。それからサプライチェーンで申しますと、原油処理につきましては、シェル社は北米、欧州が多いことはもとよりですけれども、アジア 26% と、アジアへの展開ということが出てきていると。さらに新しい分野ということでは、電気自動車充電サービス企業を昨年末に買収しているなど、積極的な展開をされているというものでございます。最後に9ページをご覧ください。9ページは、こうしたエネルギー企業の売上高、海外売上高比率をグラフ化したものでございます。横軸が全体の売上高、縦軸が海外売上高比率でございますけれども、ここには恐縮です。EDF 社とエンジン社しか載ってございませんけれども、シェルについては大変恐縮です。エンジン社は、紺色の三角でございますけれども、売上高10兆、海外売上高比率が60数%、EDF 社も10兆円規模で 50% 近くの売上高でございます。海外売上高でございます。欧州内にとどまらずにアジア、アフリカ、アメリカなどへ展開しているということでございます。かたや日本勢でございますけれども、左下にございますが、ここにかけてます一番大きなところで言うと東京電力ですが、売上高は6兆。これに対しまして海外売上は1桁台ということでございます。一番売上高大きい J パワーでございましても、2割程度ということでございますので、今後国内を超えて国際転嫁をどう図っていくかといった課題もあろうかと思います。私の方からの紹介は以上でございます。それでは、各社の皆様からプレゼンテーションをいただきます。進め方でございますけれども、プレゼンテーションを2部構成にさせていただきます。最初にシェル社のガイ大手副社長からプレゼンをいただきまして、それに関連するご質問をさせていただきます。大手副社長、この後予定がございますので、最初の1時間しかいらっしゃらないということでございますので、最初の1時間で、シェル社の説明とご質問の時間を取らせていただきます。で、この説明と質問が終わった後に、EDF 社、エンジン社の説明を受け、その後に質疑応答をさせていただくという2部構成にさせていただきます。それでは、シェル社のガイ大手副社長、プレゼンテーションをお願いいたします。
Thank you very much, and good afternoon in Tokyo, and good morning from The Hague in Holland. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but indeed we have important meetings here. It's our board meeting today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be able to speak with you today about Shell's strategy. I will first talk about how we see the energy landscape and how we see it changing, and explain how we go about thinking about that change and how it may impact the energy system and how Shell chooses to respond. And Shell has chosen to respond in a very active way in that changing system. And then I will give some brief examples of some of the changes Shell is currently making today in preparing for tomorrow. If I could go to the next slide, please. First, I have to briefly start with the usual disclaimer. The presentation does contain future statements, and therefore I'm obliged, as always, to register the disclaimer. So if we go to the next slide, please. I can assure you the rest of the slides are not like that. So energy we need to start with is recognising the importance of energy in people's lives. It lights, heats and cools homes and businesses. It transports and connects people and goods. It helps produce food, fuels water and sanitation systems. It's used in industrial processes that create the building blocks for things such as steel and cement for the world's cities and their development. And it's an invisible ingredient in countless everyday items such as fabrics, fertilisers, detergents, home insulations and plastics, many of which indirectly help address the climate challenges of the world. As a global population also increases, demand for energy will grow. Meanwhile, we'll also need to address the stresses on the environment, and particularly climate change will also be necessary to tackle. Now, a great stride forward was made in 2015 when the governments came together in Paris and achieved a landmark agreement to tackle climate change. Shell welcomes and supports the Paris Agreement, its ambition to limit the global temperature rise to below 2 degrees, indeed the aspiration to well below 2 degrees. It's an ambition that will require a change in the way energy is produced, but importantly, and also how it's used, while drastically cutting carbon emissions. Next slide. There are fundamental changes will need to happen across the global economy, especially in power, transport, buildings and industry, the four, if you like, areas that consume energy. These represent the four sectors where energy is consumed and that produce most of the energy-related CO2 emissions. Renewables have a critical role to play in a cleaner energy future, but they mainly produce electricity, which in 2016 met only about 18% of world energy demand. For renewables to have a bigger impact, electricity will also need to play a bigger role. But other activities, such as the manufacturing of steel, cement and petrochemicals, as well as the transportation of long-distance heavy goods, currently rely on hydrocarbons to provide either extremely high temperatures, chemical reactions, or dense energy storage. Many of these activities cannot be electrified at the very least for many, many years, or competitively at the moment. The global energy transition, therefore, will take decades and require unprecedented collaboration between policymakers, leaders from business and non-government organisations, and also consumers. To accelerate change, governments need to introduce long-term policies that reshape the main sectors of the economy, as well as enable the development of lower carbon and renewable sources of energy, supported by transformative technologies such as carbon capture and storage. Next slide, please. Now, the energy industry has grown massively over the last 60 years. We're about 4 times as big as we were 60 years ago, and that is a very material change. However, while our industry has become much bigger, in many ways it's also relatively unchanged from the past. In the 1950s, hydrocarbons, that's oil, gas and coal, were just over 80% of the global energy mix. Today, hydrocarbons, that again is oil, gas and coal, still provide about 80% of global primary energy. Solar, photovoltaics and wind are less than 2% of the energy system today. To meet the challenges that we faced in growing this very increasingly large energy system in the past, we moved into areas such as into deep water. We created the LNG business. We worked out how to manage onshore complex operations to access shale resources, for example. These challenges were complicated, but in a way they were also solvable. We knew that using insights, technologies we had, and smart maths, we could address these challenges. However, the change in the energy system is different. We will see the energy system change significantly over the next 20, 30 years, unlike the changes we have seen over the last 20 or 30 years. The 20% of non-oil, gas and coal parts of the energy system today will grow to 40 and even more percent by 2050. And within that, solar PV and wind will play a much larger role in the energy system. We could see them powering up to half of a much bigger electrical system in the future. So this energy transition of shifting, adding much more non-oil and gas and coal to the energy system is the first major challenge we see, and it's called the energy transition. The second major force that we see is the coming of digitalisation. Digitalisation has an impact on costs and efficiency, but also affects what we supply and how we interact with our customers. We're able to now relatively cheaply provide specific solutions and engage with customers in a way that has been too expensive or simply not possible in the past. The implications of these two forces, the energy transition and digitalisation, both individually but particularly together, are changing the nature of supply and demand. That we'll see much more electrification in our system, but it'll also change and influence where profits are made in the energy system. So that's the big picture about the shape that we see coming. And while we have a sense of that direction, the individual pathways to get to that future are not known. It is not determined and set as to which pathway we will follow. Indeed, 3 factors will determine which pathway we follow: government policy, the evolution of technology, and customer choice will together determine which pathway society, each country and the world will follow. So that takes what has in the past been a complicated problem of how to supply more energy to now what is a complex problem, because we don't even know what the shape and the pathway of that energy to be provided will be. Now, in the past, many people used forecasts to consider and plan for the future. But forecasts are not helpful in a complex system when there are multiple pathways. So old models of using expectations and forecasts we think are too limited. Rather, we need to have the ability to think about multiple and different possible future pathways. And this is where we need to understand the role of scenarios in helping our thinking of the future. Our decision-making processes need to be agile enough to contemplate the uncertainties which exist going forward. This is a much more demanding past than in the future and in using forecasts, but it actually leverages Shell's long strength of scenario thinking to tackle this problem. So if I go to the next slide, please. So let me first say something very briefly about scenarios and how we use them. Shell has been known for our thought leadership in scenarios since the 1970s. Now, scenarios are plausible and challenging descriptions of possible futures. They are meant to stretch our thinking and help us in forming our decision making. They are not forecasts, nor are they planning assumptions. We believe that by considering multiple different possible futures, scenarios help us to provide indicators as to what the early signs of which possible futures we may be on, and also prepare us for acting in certain of those futures. Next slide, please. An example of thinking about different futures and that scenarios help us think about is summarised or outlined in this chart. We have used scenarios to think about different ways that the energy system may evolve. In our scenarios published in 2013, called Mountains and Oceans, we looked at the world through different possible lenses, including the energy future. Now, as a quick reminder, mountains is a world driven by government-driven, established systems of decision-making where stability and social stability is paramount. On the other hand, oceans is a market-driven world of greater volatility, but also dispersed decision-making. The two energy futures we could see potentially in those possible worlds are outlined on the slide. You can see that both still see very large increases in the energy system, albeit the forces behind those increases are different, and you see that plays out also in the different components of the possible makeup of the energy system. Mountains sees a world of lower growth through more control, as well as lowest prices, but also then earlier climate responses as governments use tools at their disposal, such as gas, to drive responses to climate change. Oceans, on the other hand, sees higher demand leading to higher prices, which spurs further renewable development, technology developments, which allows both the development of renewables, but also higher prices, compress demand to some degree also. So we think both of these are plausible, as are other scenarios, but it gives you a sense of the different potential outcomes we need to consider. The next slide, please. Another question of interest quite typically is around how could the role of electric vehicles impact oil demand. So in the scenarios we've presented here, we've explored a very aggressive uptake of electric vehicles. Currently, electric vehicle sales are less than 1% of global automotive sales. But here we postulate either battery electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles become 10% of sales by 2025 and 35% worldwide by 2035. Very significant growth these would be. This is really pushing the boundaries when you bear in mind that this is not just for developed countries, but for the globe, including less developed countries as well. Nevertheless, when you add up those significant changes, it could potentially mean that 10% of the global passenger fleet could either be battery electric vehicle or plug-in electric vehicles by 2030, rising to even 30% of total stock by 2040. With the total fleet of cars rising from today just under 1 billion cars to near 2 billion cars by 2040, this could mean 500,000 or 500 million battery electric or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles expected to be on the road by 2040. A very significant increase. The key driver around electric vehicle uptake relates to the pace at which battery costs decline. We have made assumptions here of technology continuance of improvements, reducing the cost from around $200 per kilowatt hour today to closer to $100 to $125. The headline is that this would be a very fast transition. And you can see the impacts on demand, which would still be material, but it would see the demand driven by passenger transport peaking by 2025. However, as there are other uses for oil and that transport for passenger vehicles is only about a third of total oil demand, we still wouldn't see total oil demand peaking until 2030s. Okay, if we go to the next chart, please. So the challenge for us then is to how do we cope with the insights from possible multiple futures. If we could go to the next chart, please. So I can't see that being updated, but I assume that that's happened. We're on the chart framework for decision making in uncertainty. So the challenge is how do we gain insights from multiple future worlds rather than a forecast, and how do we build that into our decision making? So we start with the framework outlined on this page. Thank you. Firstly, it's the clarity about what are the objectives we're trying to solve for. Once those objectives are clear and relevant, then we need to consider the purpose of the decision we're trying to take. We look at the options under various different multiple futures, and we look at, and here the chart on the left-hand side, in this case shows 4 different worlds that we're thinking about in combination of energy demand and the change in technology. We think about how the business may be impacted through the value chain from production of energy through to its consumption, and as to where the value or the rent may exist in each one of those future worlds, in each one of the value chains that we think about. We then need to apply different lenses to thinking about the different outcomes and its implications for us. We would use, in that case, traditional lenses of returns and profitability and exposure, but we've also introduced and relying more on a concept we call minimising the maximum regret. That is, understanding which decisions minimise the regrets in multiple different future worlds. And here, the example I've often given is that if you're a car manufacturer, today, facing a decision about what your next production line should be it be an internal combustion engine line, or should it be an electric vehicle line, your forecast might tell you that most sales would still be in industrial internal combustion engines, so petrol-driven cars. However, if you think about a scenario when if you were to invest in a petrol line, but your major competitors of premium cars chose electric vehicles and consumers chose, for non-economic or other reasons, to move to electric vehicles, you may significantly have lost sales and missed out on a whole generation of first buyers into electric vehicles. And that may cause you risks about future sales because customers are often quite loyal. So your maximum regret may be to have indeed invested in a petrol line. So in that case, the action which minimises the maximum regret would be to invest in an electric vehicle line. So that is an example of, at a very simple level, of that concept. So we then utilise the thinking of those different lenses as to our choices. That provides us with data and insights, and we overlay that data and insights from our modelling with our beliefs and understandings and make finally our decisions. So that's a more complicated and challenging and complex decision-making process. but it's very importantly reflects the uncertainty of the energy system and its pace of change that we face going forward. It leverages also Shell's deep insights into the energy system, is that we're able to model at a granular level, often at country level, as to different energy futures, and that helps us estimate the potential outcomes of each of the different scenarios that we consider. So go to the next chart, please. So that's how we think broadly about the energy system and decision making. We then need to translate that into our strategy. And in doing so, we consider a number of the elements that come from our scenarios and other insights. And we have founded our strategy then with a summary as follows as to our beliefs about the future, because ultimately decisions are made on people's beliefs. Firstly, you can see that our beliefs are founded on the two major trends I talked about before, the energy transition and digitalisation. We then outline, for internal purposes, what we think those forces will play out in terms of economic impacts, the impacts on our markets, and the impacts on our industry. And then we're very clear in describing what do we think are the key uncertainties with respect to the macroeconomic outlook, the market, and our industry. If we go to the next slide, please. Now, those beliefs, as I said, took us to a world of change, a very significant change. And so the Shell considered whether and how to respond to that world of change. We reflected that, indeed, there are no obvious winners today in that future. Oil and gas companies, utility companies, and digital providers each have much to learn about each other's industries and strengths. Shell, however, thought about our position. We have a very strong brand. Our reach is very significant. We have more than 43,000 retail sites across the world where we engage more than 30 million customers every day. We have a very strong brand share preference in most countries where we operate in. And we also are bringing new fuels and support different e-mobility offering to customers in many new markets. So we see our core competence is to serve our end customers, and our challenge is to provide whatever they intend to buy. Whether that's electricity, we intend to serve their needs through electricity. If it's through oil and gas, then we will serve their needs through oil and gas. We also have an increasingly strong digital capability. We are offering customers both on the road in their car and now starting at home services where they can engage with Shell and be serviced more simply and quickly. We're also a very strong global trader covering oil, gas, power, and also CO2 trading. And it's built on a competence that we have leveraged from more than 100 years ago in our formation. So given the large and growing share of the energy system in the future and Shell's strong capabilities, we've made the strategic choice to be an active player in this changing energy system. We feel we can strengthen our leadership in the oil and gas industry while also positioning the company for the energy transition through leveraging our existing businesses and exploring new areas where we can develop attractive new opportunities as well as reduce potential risks. So if we go to the next chart, please. So our strategy is summarised on this page. We have a very clear drive to provide more and cleaner energy. The energy system will be much bigger than in 2050 than it is today, 40% bigger possibly, but also the nature of that energy system will change, as I outlined. We believe we can be successful in being part of this change. Our strategy seeks to leverage our brand and our other strengths, taking a customer-focused approach to providing the solutions that customers want, rather than the products that we have necessarily just today. Finally, our strategy embraces digitalisation, particularly that the world is an increasingly transparent one, and therefore taking a customer approach, focused approach, to provide solutions that they want. We also believe strongly that this transparency and the challenge of the energy system requires companies and Shell to work closely with governments, communities, our partners, and our customers to be successful in this energy system. And it's one of the reasons, again, I'm very happy to be here talking with you today. So if we go to the next chart, please, I'll touch on where our investment priorities are today. Today, Shell has what we call 3 cash engines. These are large, established businesses which are both material and mature, but also continuing to seek appropriate growth. And they are our oil products business, which is the refining and marketing of oil products. Our integrated gas business, which is particularly strong in LNG. And finally, our conventional oil and gas production activities. We also have 2 growth-focused areas. Firstly, chemicals, which recognises the significant growth in world demand for chemical and products. And secondly, deep water, which we see as a very cost-effective area for Shell for producing further oil. And we also see 2 strategic themes which are more about looking to the future, emerging opportunities. And they are our new energies business, which is particularly focusing on new fuels and electricity. And our shales business is the second. Now, the purpose of our cash engines is to fund growth and distributions to shareholders, while the growth priorities are to mature and themselves to grow to be cash engines. By 2020, we expect our deep water business to have become a cash engine and joined the other 3. It will then deliver significant cash flow and also continuing but more moderate growth. We see the chemicals business remaining a growth priority until the early 2020s, when we complete our current round of investment. We will then decide whether to continue very significant levels of investment, such as we have today, or whether to moderate that investment at the time. And then finally, we see our shales business will move to become a growth priority, growing much quicker by the end of this decade into the next decade. And then finally, on our new energies business, we aim to strengthen it and increase our understanding and our experience such that we're then to grow it in hopefully materially in the next decade. So almost the last slide, please. Just 2 to go. So Shell has provided the world energy for over a century, and we've been preparing for and investing in the challenges and opportunities of the energy transition for some time. Our technological capacity, our customer perspective, our operational experience, and our market knowledge mean that we're at the forefront of many interesting new technologies and opportunities, from deep water through to digitalisation and hydrogen electric to carbon capture and storage. This is underpinned by a relentless drive for safety and respect for the communities that we operate in. And we're a willing and able player in the global drive to provide more and cleaner energy solutions. We're confident in our ability to evolve with the energy system and provide the energy and related products that people want in their lives. In the near term, we believe the greatest contribution Shell can make is to continue to grow the role of natural gas, which emits about half the CO2 and less than 1/10 of the air pollution that coal does when burnt to produce electricity. Gas is one of the few energy sources that can be used across many sectors of the global economy, from power to plastics and fuels to feedstocks for industrial activity. As well as gas, which comprises about half of Shell's total upstream production, we keep supplying oil and its products in response to consumer demand, including those of drivers, homeowners, small businesses, large industries, airlines and manufacturers. Oil and gas will continue to be needed for many everyday products right through the energy transition. At the same time, we aim to reduce the carbon intensity of our portfolio and to continue to work on improving the efficiency of our existing operations. In addition, last November in 2017, we announced our ambition to cut the net carbon footprint of our energy products. This is expressed in terms of grams of CO2 per megajoule consumed. We want to reduce that by about half by 2050, which is what we believe the energy system globally will need to do to stay in step with the 2-degree or less pathway. As an interim step by 2035, we're aiming to reduce our net carbon footprint by around 20%. And this covers not just emissions from our own operations, but critically also from the carbon released from the products that we provide. Now, Shell is taking an active role in encouraging governments to put a price also on carbon to further incentivise lower carbon businesses and consumer choices, to drive efficiencies and to enable emission reduction technologies such as carbon capture and storage to be developed. For example, we're a private partner of the World Bank's Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, which is made up of governments, businesses and civil society, whose long-term objective is a government-led carbon price throughout the global economy. And we're working with governments to help enable effective transition plans and policies. To date, we've invested billions of dollars in a range of low-carbon technologies, including biofuels, carbon capture and storage, hydrogen and wind. All will be necessary to enable the transition. I will skip then to summarising that we expect that our investments now in our new energies businesses, particularly around new energies and fuels, will be $1 to $2 billion a year for the next few years. Through the step up of our efforts, we aim to build up a new value chain for Shell, leveraging our current strengths, acquiring new capabilities, and growing profitable new lines of business for the future. So we want to continue to enable the provision of more energy, providing people with more opportunities, and supporting vibrant economies and communities. Achieving a sensible energy mix by 2030 and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050 are major policy goals of the Japanese government. Japan aims to achieve this reduction, including reduction of CO2 emissions, while striving to maintain a good balance of economic growth. Such an ambition can only be achieved by a multifaceted approach to which we can all contribute and all collaborate. Shell wants to play our part, and through the actions I've outlined here, and also in helping people understand the debate. Recently, we've published for the first time ever many materials and many part of our data that we have regarding the current and future energy system. And this information is now all available on Shell's website. So we look forward to continued collaboration with the Japanese government and our Japanese partners. With that, thank you.
大手副社長ありがとうございました。それでは、委員の皆様からご質問あるいはご意見等あればお願いいたします。いつものようにプレートを立てていただければと思います。それでは枝広委員お願いします。
どうもありがとうございました。手短に、しかし5つ質問させてください。1点目はですね、シナリオプランニング非常に大事だと思っています。往々にしてあるべく、あり得る未来を考えるというよりも、こうあるべきだという意見で、なかなかその客観的なシナリオを描くことが難しい状況があるんですが、どのようにして、その過去こうしていたとか、こうあるべきというのから離れて、多様なシナリオを作ることができるか、これが1点目です。2つ目は、マキシマム、最大の将来に対する後悔を最小化するというお話が非常に良かったと思うんですが、その時のこの評価をする時の時間軸をどのように取られているのか、時間軸の取り方で評価変わってくると思うので、それを教えてください。3点目は、エネルギーのトランジションの担い手でもあるというお話でした。エネルギーが転換していたときにどのように対応するかという側ではなくて、それを作っていく側といったときに、実際どのようなこれまでとは違うビジネスの戦略、もしくは必要なケーパビリティがあるかを教えてください。4点目は、13ページで、今日、それから2020年まで、投資のプライオリティの話がありました。私たちの委員会は2050年までの日本のエネルギーを考えているので、例えば2050年まで時間軸を伸ばしたときに、今一番下にずっといましたが、新しいエネルギー源ですね、再生可能エネルギーと、これが上まで上がってくる可能性をお考えか、上げようとされているか、教えてください。最後の質問です。カーボンプライシングが大事だという発言を聞いてとても驚きました。化石燃料をやっていらっしゃるところは、これは大反対ではないかとずっと思っていたのですが、どのようなビジネスの戦略を持ってカーボンプライシングが自分たちにとっても大事だとおっしゃっているか、それをぜひお知らせください。ありがとうございます。
Okay, thank you for very interesting and challenging questions. Your first one regarding scenarios, I fully agree with you that many people talk about scenarios, but they're really forecasts. They are typically starting with a fixed point and running that fixed point out. Shell takes a very structured approach to our scenario formation. Firstly, we never start with energy as the question. We always start with what do we see are the key socio-economic, political, environmental, broad range of challenges that we see truly that will evolve and drive potential changes. And through that, we bring in a range of, in addition to our internal thought leaders, we bring in thought leaders from academic institutions, from society, thought leaders of both from science as well as humanities, as well as politics, as well as social history. And we explore all sorts of key trends. And then only by assessing what we think are the key areas of further potential interest of study, do we then decide how to start to explore what those future worlds may look like, deliberately choosing stretching and multiple futures, and only ultimately does that then lead to what do we think that future might mean for an energy system. Now, if the example I would give you is our 2013 scenarios that were called the new lens scenarios. They were founded on the fundamental question of how will societies make decisions? That's a very broad question. It's a very important question. And as I say, that we landed on that exploring the question, answer to either a world where governments in power, centralised and through control, make decisions, and that's a world that we call mountains, in place, structured, control, top and a bottom, through to the other extreme of transparency, technology would break down those systems and we'd have a much more fluid world, one of that really challenges formal structures, and that was our world of oceans. So you can see that we really stretched thinking, and then that only later did we think to explore what would those different futures mean for energy. So we spend a lot of time to address, just as you say, how to move away from what should be. Now, in the climate area, many people today are indeed coming up with what have to be, or what is called normative scenarios. Now, a normative scenario is simply saying what would have to be to get from point A to point B. That's really not in a way, it's a very bounded scenario. Shell tries to avoid normative scenarios wherever possible. Okay, so the second question was on minimising maximum regret and the dealing with the time span. And indeed, I think it's important to put time into this context, because in our own thinking, that in the near term, so in the next 5, even in the next 10 years in the energy system, indeed, because of historical investments and the size and the slowish pace of change, the global energy system will still only move at a relatively slow pace for the next 10 years. And in a way, forecasts could be used in that time period. It's the period after the end of the 2020 period that is much more uncertain. But because our industry typically invests for longer time periods, 10, 20, 30-year periods, it's that longer period which is where systems such as forecasts don't work, and where we need to use multiple future worlds and think about strategies that have maximum regret. So we tend to use the more complex thinking around maximum regret for longer term time period considerations. So typically investments and the economic conditions in the 2030s and the 2040s, that's where we're using minimising maximum regret thinking, not so much in the 2020s time period, except for investments that have futures depending on the 2030s. So in our business, our marketing businesses, typically what is critical is their time period into the next 10 years and even less period. For our integrated gas business, it much more is depending both in the 20s and in the 30s and the 40s, and that's where we need to think longer term as well. So on the third question around the energy transition and capabilities, and also particularly with respect to renewable energies, we see that already today that renewable energies share, the percentage growth in renewable energies in electricity is now overtaken non-renewable energy new sources. And we think that in the not too many years, the absolute total contribution will be higher, also coming from renewable energies than from new oil gas investments. We see that that's going to lead a change in our own capabilities, and Shell has made a number of moves in that area, even just in the last few months, where we have bought electric car vehicle charging suppliers in Europe. We have bought a retail electricity supplier company in the United Kingdom, and we have bought a solar PV development company in the United States. These add on to a range of other activities in the new energy space that we're very actively moving into. So we would see the rate of investment in renewable energies continuing to rise going forward from here, particularly as we will see the rise of electrification of the energy system globally increasing. And here, renewables energies, particularly solar PV and wind, and we believe complemented by gas, as will be the key areas to attract investment in the electrification system going forward. And then finally, your question on carbon pricing. Indeed, often people question, well, why would you ever ask for a tax on your own products? So that's because we believe in two things. Firstly, we believe that the energy transition and that the impact on the climate from our current activities is unsustainable, and that the world needs to change, and Shell wants to change with it. And we believe the best way that change is done is not for governments to pick winners, to choose this or choose that, but to follow economic theory, which is to tax externalities. So these are the things which are not currently considered in people's investment or consumption decisions today, because they're apparently free. So carbon is just that. It is not built into the cost or the price of goods. By building carbon into the price of goods, then businesses, including ourselves, can make rational economic decisions about how best to provide the energy people need, but at low carbon implications for the world environment. And so that's why we have been a supporter for carbon pricing for many, many years.
ありがとうございます。それでは山崎委員お願いします。
はい。大手さん、今日は、とても広範囲にわたる系統だったご説明ありがとうございました。委員の山崎と言います。2点追加でご質問ですけれども、すいません、3点です。1点目が、政策技術顧客の、不確定要素がある中で、コンプレックスプログラムだということなんですけれども、それらが連携を取るのがいいのか悪いのかわかりませんが、もし、取るとすればどのような連携の取り方を、アドバイスされるでしょうか。で、2点目が、7ページのご資料の中に、マウンテンズシナリオとオーシャンズシナリオを挙げてくださいました。で、オーシャンズの中で、やはり目を引くのが、2040年から2070年にかけてソーラーが大幅に増えているところです。で、これは何か具体的な、例えば技術革新なり何かシナリオの中で考慮されたことがあるのか、もしあれば差し支えない範囲で教えてください。で、3点目が水素に関してですけれども、シェルさんはハイドロジェンカウンシルのメンバーでもあると伺っていますが、今後その水素インフラとの連携というものはどのように考えていらっしゃるか、そちらもお伺いできればと思います。以上です。
Thank you very much for those questions. So the first question on, indeed, collaboration and partnerships. So we look to do this through various and many forms. We, of course, make our own outline of our beliefs publicly, but we also work with a large number of government and private industry and combined government and private industry thought groups, thought leadership groups to advocate, to educate, to understand the issues around climate change and how to respond. So some of the examples I would give you is that we are members of industry bodies such as the OGCI, which is an oil and gas body looking at low carbon solutions. We have also, we're a foundation signatory to the Economic Forum's Task Force for Climate Change and Financial Disclosures, which is the Governor of the UK Reserve Bank, Mark Carney's led initiative to companies to voluntarily disclose their impact, their exposure to the changing energy system, and make clear to investors and others how the future may play out in our exposure. And then we work in collaboration with a number of governments in thinking about their energy systems and their future, and we do that with both European governments. We have worked with the DRC in China for many years. We have worked with many other governments as partners in thinking around energy issues. And then finally, we work with partners on energy solutions. And indeed, we are working with Japanese partners on potential for hydrogen as a energy carrier for bringing energy into Japan. We are working in a collaboration of government, infrastructure players with hydrogen and marketers of hydrogen products, as well as the suppliers of hydrogen in Germany, which is a very large trial to develop hundreds of hydrogen filling stations along a defined network where the government is helping and supporting, as I say, everything from the provision of the hydrogen through to the infrastructure, through to the marketing, as well as the car companies, Toyota, Hyundai and others, supporting the provision of vehicles. So we see that collaboration is needed in all areas of both understanding as well as provision of and exploring of possible different energy futures. Second question was around in our oceans scenario, why the very significant role of solar post 2040. So briefly in our oceans scenario, it's a world of dynamic business. It's a world of accelerated growth. It's that trade barriers have fallen, technology moves ahead, there's great prosperity as the 7 billion people today rise to the 10 billion people of the future. And that's a very dynamic world, lots of demand. And that demand is pulling on energy and it's increasing the price of energy. That increase in price is both somewhat dampening traditional forms of demand for traditional energy supplies, but also encouraging further investment in renewable energy technologies because they're more cost competitive. They're spurring further and accelerated technology development. And we're assuming that that accelerates the breakthrough and further development of renewable, in particular solar PV developments. So we don't have a one particular technical answer, but rather it's a more conducive, higher price, encouraging more demand and encouraging more technical focus and investment to lead to the provision of more relatively competitive renewable sources. And then thirdly, on hydrogen, I briefly touched on that in the first question. Indeed, we think hydrogen is a potentially very important energy carrier. We do think that the energy system of the future will be what we call a mosaic, which means lots of different solutions in different cities. So Houston's solution will look different to Tokyo's, which will look different to Melbourne's, which will look different to Singapore's, which will look different to Mumbai's. So we will see different solutions in each city. And we think hydrogen has a role both in potential for certainly long distance transport, potentially also for passenger vehicle transport in many locations, as well as potentially a long distance transport from maybe even a gas or a photovoltaic generation of hydrogen, for example, in the Middle East, being then converted to hydrogen and brought to consuming countries such as Japan and others in the future. So those are all possible futures of which we are exploring. And indeed, whereas I think the saying goes that producing one electric car and servicing its development is very easy because the existing infrastructure is in place, so the challenge is producing the car. On hydrogen, it's the other way. But it's very hard to scale up electric cars to a huge amount because of charging, necessary electricity generation, very demanding for electric vehicle to be solely the answer, where hydrogen is the other way. We have a very good infrastructure, and the challenge is to enable the first, if you like, the first production of the starting of the hydrogen system, as opposed to the mass scale of hydrogen, which we think indeed is easy to provide. So that's a key role, therefore, of governments to enable the starting, if you like, of a hydrogen infrastructure system.